different lives?
I pretty much experienced things on my own. Um, I started having visions like I did on the other books that I talked about, and the most phenomenal part about it was that I was getting a very strong reaction to seeing white cinder block buildings.
Huh.
And I had no explanation for it, but I would just be driving along and I would see a building like that, and my breathing would start to change, and I would get short of breath, and
Uh-huh.
it was like panting. And this happened on more than one occasion, and every time it would happen, I would try to figure out why was this happening, and the only thing I could determine is that it must have been a past life,
Yeah,
because there was
yeah.
nothing in my current life that had ever struck me that I should feel that way.
So that was a bit of a panic kind of a feel?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and I searched for a long time for a word to describe this emotion as I continually had it, and the only word I could come up with was to be aghast.
Wow.
And I had a tarot card reader that used to be a next door neighbor, and I had seen her, and she said, "Hey, did you ever figure out what that was all about?" And I said,
Yeah.
"No." I said, "I've been struggling with this for years. I cannot draw that information. I don't know where it's from." She said, "Well, I think I know someone that can help you." And I said, "She's a channeler, and I think you should go see her. She
Yeah.
does past life readings."
Oh.
I said, "Well, fine." So I make an appointment, and I did go to see her. And I probably had a lot of questions for her, but she was really a channeler.
Yeah.
And she brought in one of my guides, pretty much introduced me to my guide and asked me if I knew him, and I said I didn't think so.
Uh-huh.
And I should probably back up. One of the things I did prior to going to this channeler is trying to figure out what happened. Because I could draw on myself to get these visions, I said to my girlfriend, who was my mentor, I said, I should be able to take myself in one of those buildings
Yeah.
and discover what it is that panics me.
Uh-huh.
She said, "Yes, you probably can."
Yeah.
So I passed a building one day, and I mentally took myself in that building. And what I saw was a man on a cot with his back to me, and he was curled in a fetal position. It was a very sterile room, and I was on the side looking on. Well, having that information, then I went to this channeler, and I had the feeling that this might have been my father
Okay.
from a previous life.
Yeah.
Well, I went to this channeler, and with my guide there, I said, I don't understand what this is and why I'm feeling this way. And I said, "Was that my father?"
In
And
another life.
In another life. And the channeler said, "No, it was not your father. It was a man that you had a strong affiliation with.
Hmm.
You were in an institution, and you were there to care for this man."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Institution? Is that like a mental institution?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Yes, it was an insane asylum."
Wow.
And she said that the man that you cared for was a visionary, much like myself.
Yeah.
But she said he was before his time,
Yeah.
and he was put in there because they thought him to be crazy. So he was kept in this institution. Well, then I was told later in the reading, which incidentally fit with my feeling of seeing a man on a cot in this
Yeah.
sterile room.
And those places have a certain vibration about them.
Certainly.
Those institutions. I have little
Yes.
stories of my own. Even driving by,
Yes.
there's a sadness,
Right.
big sadness.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I'm storing all of this information that I'm learning and trying to figure out what really happened. And but when I went out of there, I was just kind of in a daze, thinking that tied in with the vision that I saw myself, is that I was in this institution. Well, I was told that I would be meeting a man in this life in that year that would have been from that life.
Wow.
And one man was a psychiatrist and one was his aide. And that I would know when I met him because of the feelings I would have,
Yeah.
which one he would be.
Yep.
And that one of them tortured this man in the institution.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I ended up meeting both of those men in that year.
So one was the aide to the other?
One was the aide,
Yeah.
and this was the synchronicity. I was having an addition put on my home, and a plumber was there doing work in the bathroom, and he brought his aide with him. And when I saw the aide, I looked at that man, I thought, "Oh, I know you from somewhere."
Yeah.
And he looked at me, he didn't know me at all.
Not in this
I mean, I
lifetime.
was just certain, absolutely certain. And I kept saying, where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? And we went
Yeah.
through all of this history and stuff, and nothing tied in. And then I learned that his wife's name was the same as my name, Ellen. And that was some form of synchronicity.
Yeah.
Still wasn't tying it with this past life. It was months later, I met a gentleman. I was single at the time. I met a gentleman, and we started to date, and he was telling me about his family and that he had 2 children. He was very proud of his children. And his daughter was in marketing, and she was doing very well. And he was especially proud of his son because he had become a psychiatrist. And he went through this learning experience having an affliction. He was born with an affliction of his eye. And what happened is that he constantly blinked. And he was able to study and get through school and become a psychiatrist. Well, there were other things that told me that this man had some connection to this life. I tried to draw on his spirit to find out what had gone on in his life.
Yeah.
And the first time I did, I got this blank screen. And whenever I get a blank screen, it upsets me because I know that the spirit world isn't ready to give me that information yet.
Yeah.
And then finally I did get a vision, and I saw him crawling up out of a manhole. Now that didn't sound too good to me. And I pressed for more information and more information, and finally I got this black widow spider. And at the same time is when I learned that this man had a son with an affliction of the eye and was a psychiatrist, and it just hit me.
Oh my gosh.
That was the psychiatrist of the past life who tortured my friend in the institution,
Yeah.
Karma. His son was born with the affliction in this life from the eye torture.
Yeah. Amazing. So is this book particularly about that one life, or are there more that you discuss of your previous life?
There are other lives.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the main part of the story. But what I didn't mention is that when I was collecting all of this information and I had seen the channeler, it must have been a year later, I picked up the phone and I called this channeler and I said, "Where do you think that institution was?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said, "Well, I don't know." She said, "I'm not real good at geography, but give me a minute." And she thought about it and she said, "I think it's England."
Ah.
And she said, "Does that sound right to you?" And I said, "It probably does. I have some English background, and it
Yeah,
would tie in
yeah.
with me very well."
Now, even in this lifetime, do you have any heritage from the UK?
No one that lives there, but my grandmother was English.
Okay. So that,
Yeah.
we often say, I often say in talks I give about reincarnation, it's interesting in America
Yes.
because you have Polish Americans, Italian
Right,
Americans. They
right.
probably had a life in
Yeah,
that
and
country.
my mother, she was never in England, but apparently she picked up some of the mannerisms and some of the verbiage, and I
Yes.
find I do myself too. And someone says hi to me, I say hello,
Yeah, yeah.
and just different things. That
Yeah.
I have a British friend that tells me, "Yes, that's from England. That's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
very,
yeah,
very
yeah.
British," And so I know that I do that, and when I went to, and what I should tell you, this British friend, he would go to England every other year.
Yeah.
And when I found out that this experience that I had talked about was probably from England, I called him and I said, "Are you going to go there soon?" He said, "Yes, I'm going in
Yeah.
April. Would you like to go?" And I said, "Yes." Yes. Well,
Hey.
it was probably the strangest itinerary he ever had, but he was most accommodating. We went to mental institutions. We
Oh, my
went
gosh.
to cemeteries. We
Yeah.
went all over England.
Yeah,
We put
yeah.
1,700 miles on a car. But the
just-
most phenomenal thing was that once my feet hit the ground in England and we were on a canal boat trip that I did not want to go on,
Yeah.
we passed places that memories just kept coming in and
Yeah.
flooding me, and I
Yeah.
knew I had been there.
Oh, yeah.
And
Deja vu.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even more than that, dreams that I had thought were dreams of 50 years ago came into my mind,
Oh, my gosh.
and they were past life memories.
Yeah.
But I remembered them from childhood, and I probably hadn't thought of them in 50 years, and they were very vivid in my mind.
That's so amazing.
And I knew that I had been there on those canals.
Now, does this book also run into conversing on a higher level?
No, actually, it's quite different.
What's that one about? Conversing on a higher.
That was quite an unusual experience as well. Just one moment on the looking back, I wanted to say that I had revelations come to me constantly so fast that I couldn't write fast enough. Things that were
Oh
coming
my
in from
gosh.
that life and other lives.
Yeah.
And it was something I could not really describe. It just was a phenomenal experience to get all that information.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, on to the new book, Conversing on a Higher Level. This was an experience of a past lover
In a past life?
from a current life.
Oh, current life. Okay.
Current life.
Yeah.
He and I had separated for reasons that I didn't quite understand. And actually, his life and mine continue through all of the books,
Yeah.
spiritually,
Yeah.
with not so much of him being in my life, mostly
Yeah.
spiritually. And in this book, I met a man that I took to immediately,
Yeah.
and he just felt so familiar. And I was quite taken by him, and he
Yeah.
by me.
Yeah.
And when we first met, the circumstances around our meeting were rather strange. We both struggled to get to this meeting place under very unusual circumstances, but we were both driven to be there. We walked into an establishment at the same time, not knowing one another, struck up a conversation, and became friends. And in talking to them the whole evening, he was just so comfortable to be with. And we ended up making a date for the following weekend. And before the weekend was out, he called me, and he just couldn't wait to see me. And
Wow.
it was just
Yeah.
such a strong attraction. And the more I saw him, the more I realized that much of his life patterned the man that I had been involved with at a previous time.
In a previous life.
In a same
Yeah.
life.
Oh, same
life. Same life.
Yeah.
But I kept recognizing his personality was so much like his. They had similar traits in that they were both salesmen, and they were both very good at their work, and
Yeah.
they both excelled in their work. And the similarities, I started making a chart of, all the things, and I couldn't begin to list them all, but it was like they both called me several times throughout the day.
And unfortunately, we've come to the end of our show.
Okay, I can't tell you the rest of that.
That's going to have to be another time.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
We've been showing your website there,
Okay.